Now, the work that you've been doing, I want to talk a little bit about that, the very important work that has drawn attention to many millions of people around the world. Can you describe rather briefly the motivation for you to do this? What is it? Is it generalized, just getting to the bottom of things and the truth, or are there some other motivations that you have, say in foreign policy, or how did you get so involved in this and get so much attention for this?
Yeah, well, I have a philosophical view that that every law, every regulation, every constitution, in fact, every decision that we take, even as individual human beings, comes about as a result of what we know and the communications that we have, and the sum total of the intellectual wealth of our civilizations, of our societies, are all based upon what we know. So we can only be as good as what we know. We can't be any better than what we know. Our decisions insofar as we try and make them about the world we live in have to be based on the world we live in. If they're based upon fantasies, we end up with things like the Iraq War. There was a decision about a world that we didn't live in, a world where Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which he did not, and the result is a catastrophe. So I look at this sort of long historical view about the development and sophistication and humanity of civilization being based on that. Then I would have to say, just personally, I don't like lies. In the Australian context, we would say, in fact, one of our party slogans is that it's time to make the bastards honest in Canberra, which is the Australian capital. And that's something that's appreciated by the Australian population, but they don't like being lied to either. And so I like a good fight. I like to know the truth, but in this bigger philosophical realm, I think the way for people to be free and the way for people to receive justice is for there to be more knowledge and more truth about how human institutions actually behave.
I wanted to bring up the subject of certain incidences that might prompt, governments to do certain things. Prior to the Iraq War, some of the neocons here in America wrote that a Pearl Harbor event in general would be a good idea because we could take advantage of it and we could bring all the people together. I was shocked that they were so blunt that it could be a positive to have a Pearl Harbor event. They didn't say let's create one. I'm not trying to say that, but they said if there's a Pearl Harbor event or if somebody else does it, yeah, let's take advantage of it. But haven't you touched on this subject of somebody looking for an incident with Syria that would justify, all the countries to come in and the United States government to come in, the British government to come in and do something in Syria? Was there something along that line that you had discovered?
That's right. I mean, part of the Stratfor release by WikiLeaks. Stratfor is a U.S. Intelligence contractor based in Texas, and we got hold of 5 million of their emails, and they do consulting work for many different government organizations and private organizations. And one of those emails from late 2011, December 2011, is a report back from one of their agents meeting with the U.S. Air Force, representatives of the French military and British military, speaking about what the hopes and game plan was under various circumstances, essentially by the West or by the US and NATO, if you like. And that they really felt that what they needed was for there to be some humanitarian outrage in Syria. And that once they had that, that would legitimize going in with a big airstrike. And of course, they wanted to for other reasons. They were funding rebels. There's even talk about sending special operations forces in there. In fact, that are already there on the ground advising people, assassination campaigns and so on. So the usual stuff, the usual way you subvert a government was being spoken about there very frankly. but most of all, for a bigger involvement, they needed some humanitarian outrage to hook it all onto. And we have seen that. I'm not suggesting that it was fabricated, although it is still possibly the case that the rebels may have done it. But for sure, it has now been taken advantage of. These countries never really gave a damn about Syrians before. They didn't care about Syrians. And if we look at the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, which is appalling, or the human rights situation in Bahrain, where a friend of mine who I interviewed has been held in a brainy prison for over 2 years for tweeting. They don't give a damn about that. They just want to take advantage of this situation in order to achieve what they see as their geopolitical ends in Syria.
One of the charges made against you and individuals like me who will defend openness in government and finding out what's going on is if you release this information, many innocent people are going to die. It's going to reveal secrets that people will suffer. And the way I understand it, you've gone to an extreme length to try to prevent this. And I would think that if any single person had been injured or died from the releases of information, they would be out there with that news. Is this just their propaganda for them to try to dissuade you from doing things? So just tell us exactly what you do to try to prevent any injury to anybody or anybody getting killed over the release of this information.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's an empirical point, right? Either this sort of publishing activity that we engage in gets people killed, or it doesn't, right? It's just a factual question. Well, we have 7 years of publishing history. Not a single person has physically come to harm. Now, that's not me saying that. That's the US government saying that. In fact, General Carr, the person who was responsible for looking into this issue in the Pentagon, said under oath just 2 months ago in the Bradley Manning trial that they could not find a single person that had come to harm as a result of our releases about the activities of the Pentagon, or in fact any part of the US government. And no government official, not from the Pentagon, not from the State Department, not from other governments, alleges that we have caused even a single person to come to harm. So it's very interesting that you often hear that question spoken about, because it's completely false. Now, those people who've been involved in reporting on government activity over the years will tell you that is the line that is always trotted out, every single time. They've been doing it for 50 years at least. Every time that there's an embarrassing release of information revealing deception in government, that's the line to try and change the topic. They couldn't argue on the facts. Our facts are indisputable. We also have the world's best record for having never got it wrong. We have never released a document that has been misdescribed by us, released a false document saying it's true or something like that. So they couldn't argue on the grounds that what we were saying was false. So they have to try and, as we would say in Australia, play the man and not play the ball.